Hello, Ken Spriggs here with part 2 of my commission build for my Moebius 2001 EVA Pod that I'm working on. In this video, I'm honing in the proper effects that I'm going to use for the light boxes for the controls inside. The controls themselves are the most challenging part of this build, primarily because you have different color buttons, you have different brightness of some of the buttons, and there's a lot of them. So quite a lot, and I definitely want to keep the wiring down to the minimum if I can. And so I'm using some techniques that instead of using individual SMDs and colored ones and things like that, I'm using things such as distance and other colored materials for diffusion, which I'll show here in a moment, in order to get that effect. And my goal here is that the average person could do what I'm doing and replicate it. I'll be showing you the steps that I'm doing and giving you an idea of, on this particular kit, how this would work. You can use these same techniques on pretty much any model, most models I should say, where you have a large area to light and you're doing different colors and different brightness and that kind of thing. And do it the simplest way. So each model is unique, of course, so you have to adapt your approach. But these techniques work well in many different ways, and I've shown them before with other models that I built. So let's go ahead and take a look, and we'll see how I'm going to work out the control lighting. All right, so since I'm lighting these upper panels here, I want to go ahead and do a test fitting to make sure that I'm going to have plenty of room as far as the light boxes are concerned. And having not put this together yet, I just wanted to get an idea of what kind of room I'm working with. So actually, quite a bit of room, no problem at all. As you can see, this whole area is wide open. Now, over here, of course, is where the right earmuff is going to go on. Let me show you here. But even when you look at it, that piece is just ever so slightly sticking out from that. So even with this part on, which is wide open, it's not going to be a problem. There's not going to be any issues whatsoever. And I don't have anything lit up on this piece sticking out either. It's just a solid part of the wall. So all the pieces that are going to be lit up with boxes, plenty of room inside of here that aren't going to be affected at all. In fact, the only part that's going to be an issue, which I've already noticed, is that down here I'm going to have to cut off a corner of this because underneath, obviously, there are some light boxes lighting the bottom controls there. So that's the only other thing I'm going to have to modify in order to be able to accommodate those. But plenty of room right here, and this is going to be fairly flush anyway. It's not going to be that far out. So plenty of room right there. Plenty of room underneath this piece here, which isn't going to be blocking anything. And of course, these here are going to be just fine also. So no problems at all. Now, I do believe, and from watching Lou Del Masso's build, when I get to the top roof points, there are going to be a few spots where there are some lights that are going to be kind of tiny and compact. Some of those I may end up using some SMDs, like mega SMDs, that kind of thing, where I can put them in fairly flush and then just make sure that I wire them for 12 volts as well. So, okay, nice design. I like how it goes together. There aren't really any seams along the bottom or the sides. The only major seam that you have to worry about is right up here on the top. It goes across the top, which isn't going to be that much of a problem. So once the entire interior is done, I will encase it and glue it inside of this shell that's unpainted, and then I'll fix that seam, of course, and then we'll get it painted with all the electronics and lights inside of it. So, okay, but this is obviously going to be a massive model, as you can see. Trying to move this around. I just have it taped together right now. But indeed, this is going to be really big. All right. And then if you look inside, you're going to see quite a bit of that through this window. Pretty much all of it. You're going to see all of that over there. If you look from the angle, you're going to see the back walls. Plus, of course, you'll see from the back of it, you'll see the controls as well. Let me turn that around and show you. Yeah, so with the back door open, there'll be a little bit of the door like right about here because it opens at an angle. But yeah, you're going to see a nice shot of all of that as well. Of course, the astronaut will be in the middle, but he's not going to be blocking much because there's really no lights around this part right where he's sitting. So you're going to see everything else. I don't have that other sidewall one, of course. But definitely going to look pretty cool. So, okay. I just want to get an idea. And you always have to think a couple of steps ahead because once I go ahead and get the light boxes put in and attached, I don't want to have a problem where they're not fitting. And again, that's one of the beauties of this model is that it's so big that there's plenty of room on the most part for putting in the wiring and that kind of thing and the lights. So, okay. Pretty awesome. All right, well, let me go ahead and keep working on that side panel there, and then we'll get some lights on it. All right, so I'm working on the light boxes on this part here, and I'm kind of redefining the final design, and then I may go back and repeat it on the ones for the bottom, or at least redo a few of them. We'll see. Most of them I did sort of the same thing. So what I'm doing is I'm using the .030 styrene sheet as this piece here that goes in the bottom. Then I'm using actually some stripping. So I'm using this .040 stripping, which is this wide stripping. And I'm also using this .040. Now the .040 has to do with the thickness, I believe. These are a little more confusing. So actually the width of it has to do with it, and the .060. I'm not sure how, but these are the ones I'm using if you want to kind of look that up. So what I'm doing is I'm making two different kinds. So I have this thicker strip, which I'm using on the sides of this to make the box. And I figured this gives it a nice distance away from the buttons for most of them, so that they have a proper diffusion, and then they're going to have the right brightness that I want. Now, some of them, like this panel right here, all of these underneath the two displays, are very bright. They're much brighter than the rest. So what I'm using is this thinner strip in order to make a very thin light box. As you can see, very flat. So then this one goes right here, over top of that. I have to trim it down a little bit more. And you can see I glued down the clear styrene. Now for these ones, because I wanted them to be a little bit different color, not just the pure yellow, more of a warm white, I only have one layer of that here. These other ones, all the other ones, these are 2 layers, because I figured that 2 layers, I determined that 2 layers is the right amount to give me the right brightness, the right color, I'm sorry, the right color saturation. One was just not enough, it was too pale. So this is double right here for yellow, this is only single. So it comes out kind of a warm white as opposed to being yellow. So it'll look different than the other buttons. And I think these are supposed to be yellow too. I have to look and see. So these I still have to do. These 2 right here I still have to do. So right now I have this panel, and this panel. So like over here, I have this one. This one goes over like this. Some of these, like this one here, it was easier to do just a big panel that would cover the whole section. Other ones, like over here, of course, since I'm going to have different lights, different closeness, this has to be separate from this. And then it really wasn't convenient to put these little ones here or these little ones here onto these other ones. Especially not down here because this is a different distance away from it. So basically what I'm doing is I'm achieving the desired look to have some buttons brighter than others, some to be different colors, but I'm using the same LED strips all across the board. So these are all the same. None of the lights themselves are different. So it makes it a lot easier to be able to do this and not have to worry about painting the buttons or using different color LEDs, that kind of thing. So let me go ahead and tape some of these onto here, and I'll kind of show you the idea of what I'm talking about of the different colors, the different brightness and that sort of thing. All right, so there you go. So here's a test lighting of them. So you can see here's the yellow, here's the blue. These are the warm white, but you can see these are considerably brighter than these ones over here. And again, they look better in person than they do on here. Plus I don't have these boxes completely glued down all the way. They're just sort of in position. But you can see if you go and watch the film and you see a clip of it, these are considerably brighter, and this is how they really look. They look like that. So I wanted to be able to have some of the buttons looking at different brightness than other ones. And I might do that with some other ones as well, maybe some of these small ones just to make them stand out. But I'm trying to imitate what you see in the film, which is pretty much this here. So what I want to make, what I want to try to get across here with these videos is that you can do these kind of things yourself. You can do this type of a lighting and do it an easier way like I'm doing, just using things like distance, diffusion, in order to get the different things, different color gels like I'm doing here with the plastic. You can even use Tamiya colored paints, which I've done before, and not have to go through all the hassle of wiring together a bunch of different color LEDs and that sort of thing. So I'm spending more time working on other things that are more important, such as masking all these buttons off, which takes some time. I'm also going to be doing more with the decals and that sort of thing. So I don't have to spend as much time once I get this dialed in as far as the distance and how far away I want the lights to be, or the LEDs to be. And you can see these buttons are all evenly lit. They're not any hot spots. Same with down here. This one, a little bit more. These have a little bit more of an emphasis on some. You can't see it in the camera because it washes it out, but because it's closer. But again, it's not a problem because these ones are supposed to be significantly brighter and different than the rest. So there are many ways that you can light your models. Certainly many ways you can use different lights and LEDs, especially on this kit since there's so many controls to light. But I like to use the simplest methods that, you know, like I said, the average person could do. If you can learn how to solder these LED strips, and quite honestly, by me doing a lot of these, I've gotten a lot better at it because I'm just doing the repetition, and that's kind of how you learn a skill and hone it and make it better for yourself. So that's the hardest part, really, is to put that on there and to get the various little beads of solder onto those. And then building the light boxes is pretty straightforward, as I showed previously. All I'm doing is I'm putting a piece of tape over top of the area, drawing it out, cutting it out, putting it on the plastic, cut it out. And then in some cases, once I do that, I just can replicate the same piece on another part, and I just trace it out onto a piece of styrene and cut it out. And then that way I have a template so I can make another one. So yeah, and that's the beauty of it. Since I'm using just one color cool white light strip, I don't have to worry about having separate panels at all. I just let the colored styrene do it for me. And so work harder, not smarter, or smarter. I just messed that up. Wasn't being very smart. Work smarter, not harder is the saying that people say. So I definitely recommend these techniques, and I will continue to show these on the rest of this control panel here. All right. All right, so work continues on the light box for this main section right here. Now, I filmed some video, and initially, as I showed previously, I went with some separate light boxes, and I had one like this one here for this section right here, and I had another one for down here, and I was building one over here. Now, I filmed some footage where I decided to make that into one whole section, which you can see right here. And initially, I had lights glued to it, and I had a little raised light box. Here's all the lights. I ended up pulling them back out again. And I was careful so I didn't break any of them. So here was the little light box. This went right here, so it raised up the lights to be closer to make this area brighter. And then the other ones are further back for these other areas. Now, the problem with that, and the reason I had to tear these back out, is that I'm actually dealing with 3 levels of diffusion here. Sorry. And as far as distance. So on this particular panel, this one here, obviously most of these lights are the further away distance, the medium distance that I've designed for the rest of it. And then these ones down here are closer, so the LEDs have to be closer to make them look brighter. Now the problem I was running into is that when I put in some LEDs into the middle part here to light up the displays, I was running into a problem. So what was happening is, when I had the lights the same distance from the displays that I have from the buttons, they were just too bright, or not too bright, but they had too many hot spots. And I tried several different diffusion methods with some thin styrene or some vellum, and I just could not get them to be bright enough, but not to have the obvious hot spots from the LEDs. So this section here needs to be just a little further back than the other ones. So for this section right here, I need to have 3 different distances of the LED strip tape in order to work. So you have your close, your medium, and then your further away. So in order to make that work, I went ahead and I cut out another one of this to kind of work with. So this area right in here is where I need to have this further, well, these parts further back, this part closer to it. And then these other ones are just going to be the mid range. So I'm going back to the original idea of having them separated so I can have different distances and use that tape. Now, one thing I'm going to have to do, and it's kind of hard to avoid, but certain ones like the ends of these, these two right here, there's really not a ton of room to get any kind of SMD tapes. You can see I don't have this blue over top of those, and those are supposed to be like a white anyway. So I'm going to end up using some separate SMDs that I can just put in those areas. So I could have like one here, one over here, and one in each of these, and just do them individually so I can have those lit up. There might be a few other areas on some of the other ones where it's just really hard to get the LED tape into, like a corner kind of thing. So I have a large order coming from EVA Designs to give me a lot of the SMDs, and some of them I have wired together in sets of 4, which make it easier. So this would be one of the ones I could do. So I could have 1, 2, 3, 4. I actually have, here's an example of one. So here's 4 mega SMDs that are all wired together. Now this is only rated at 3 volts, so I can't use it in this build since I'm using this at 12 volts, but just to kind of give you an idea, this is just attached to a battery. So if I just have a single, if I just have a single bulb, you can see how I can light that up. I can light this up. I can have it over these ones here, and so on. So 4 of them would be easy enough to have, like 2 at the top, 2 down over here, and then those would just be individual, and I wouldn't be using a ton of individuals throughout the whole lighting project. So definitely more tweaking going on in this process. And again, I'm still at the research and development stage where I'm figuring out how I'm going to do this on the whole thing. And once I get it dialed in, then I just repeat the process. And just like I did here, I just trace this out, cut out a new one, so this will work fine on the other one. This may even fit on the other side. We'll have to see. But in the end, I'm going to have all of these where they need to be. So this one's done. This one's ready to go for this section. This one's done. And this is ready to go for up here. So once I get these worked out, for this one, I just have to do this panel, which this one should be easy. Again, no variations in brightness. So that'll be easy enough to have just one panel right here, just like I did this. This will be easy to do. It's just the ones where there's a variation in the brightness and or displays are involved that causes the issue. That's really where it comes down to. So, but it's looking good. It's coming to where I want it to be. And then I'm also working on some ideas with how to do the displays. I have a couple of different things. The decals, of course, that came with the kit. Here's an example of one that I believe this is from Paragraphics. It's one that I'm not going to use, so I didn't mind cutting it out. It's kind of a boring one. But I don't know if I'm going to use the clear plastic part or not and frost it, or if I'm just going to use it over top of some white styrene. But I'll get that figured out as far as doing those as well. So, okay, let me continue to work on this and then get the final light boxes all done for this section right here. All right, so several people have asked me what kind of wire that I'm using here. So let me kind of demonstrate and show you that here. This is what's called magnet wire, and I get mine from EVA Designs online. I'll leave a link in the description. So what this is a spool. I've had this for a while of this wire, and I don't know what the numbers mean particularly, but it's 30 AWG in case you're wondering. It's twisted red and green. It's solid copper, but it's nice and flexible. So it's not like a real rigid copper. I've had some solid copper wire with a plastic coating that tended to be very fragile and snap a lot. This is very hardy, and I rarely ever have it snap on me and break when I'm moving it around, losing a connection. So it's very thin, and it's two strands that are woven together or twisted together, and they have kind of a baked on coating, I guess I could describe it. It's not like a plastic coating like you would have on typical wire that you would use a a wire stripper to remove. So you have to kind of do it a little differently. And let me kind of show you how I end up doing this. The process that I've come up with that I think works pretty well. All right, so let me go ahead and get that. So you got to get it started, untwist it. So you have the strands separated for the ones that you want to get the coating off of. I'm doing this on camera while I'm looking at the camera. So, all right, so I take them apart like that. Now what I generally do is I will take a lighter. I just have this little lighter, and I just lightly put the tip of it just on the two strands, and you can actually see it kind of burn it off. And the reason for that is that it just slightly burns it off and loosens it just on the part that I'm trying to remove. And because I'm just putting a tiny bit onto this little copper bit here, I don't need a whole lot of it exposed. I just need a little bit. So what I do then is I just have this multi-tool, which has a nice flat grip. So it doesn't really hurt the wire. So what I do is I stick it right at the junction of the two where they separate, and I just hold it down firmly. I don't have to do it really super tight. And then I just took this little piece of sandpaper, which I cut and then folded in half so I have a bit. I tend to overlap them so I have a little part that I can get into there. So then all I do, again, I'm trying to do this on camera, is I stick it over top of it and I just pull it away, letting the sandpaper remove that coating. Usually about 4 or 5 times. One direction, and then I move it sideways. Sorry if that's not in frame. And I just do it the other way. And you can actually see, because it's red and green, so you can see the coating come off, and you can see that copper underneath. So if you can see that there. Okay. And then that way I just do it until I have the full piece exposed, and I do the same on the other side. And then that gives me a bare end that I can solder nicely onto it. And the rest of it's twisted together and it's nice and solid. So this is really nice wiring to use in a project like this. It's very compact, and I don't have to worry about it being in the way with the much thicker wires. So, all right. All right, so I'm also going to demonstrate what I've learned about doing soldering, especially onto these little LED strips, because they have the nice little copper contact points. I'm not a very good person at soldering. I'm not an expert at it by even a close stretch, but doing a lot of this has made me a little better at it, and it's honing my skill on it. The trouble I often have is to get the solder to stick to the wire and or the part that's here. And doing a lot of reading and checking out some other tutorials, I kind of determined that it has to do with the fact that both parts get hot enough. The wire gets hot enough, this contact point gets hot enough, so the solder will stick to it. I've tried to do like roughing up with sandpaper and things like that, and obviously this wire is a little roughed up since I use sandpaper to take the coating off. But what I've learned is the heat is the key. So I don't have a variable soldering iron. I just have a one set temperature one. I got this at Hobby Lobby. It's not bad. And it's heated up, so I'm not going to touch it. I have a little holder over here to the side, which you can't see on camera. But here's my solder. So let me go ahead and show you how I do this. So first of all, I start with the wire. So here's the wire that I cleaned off with the sandpaper. I just have it taped onto this wood surface here because it doesn't get affected by the heat or the solder. And I have it raised up in the air so I can get a little dot of solder on both ends of it. That'll make it easier then to go ahead and put it onto here. So let me go ahead and do that first. I hope it's in camera since I'm doing this and trying to focus on it. All right, so the first thing I do is I bring this tip, and like I said, this is preheated, so I bring it over and I let it start to heat up the wire. So the wire is going to be hot to accept the solder. Then I bring it in. You can see, so it's stuck to the wire, and that's the important part. There's a little dots, and I would just kind of lightly put the tip there and release the the rest of it. There we go. Now I have a little dot of solder, nicely sized. So let me do it for the second one. Again, I just kind of let it heat up the wire a bit. Doesn't take too long. And you can tell when it sticks to it. That's kind of the important part. Otherwise, it will not stick to it. It'll just fall off. There we go. So I got two. All right. So that's all set. Let me go ahead and stop the camera, and I will get this positioned down to here, and I'll show you how I solder it onto this LED strip tape. All right, so I now have it positioned where the two parts are just sat down on top of the two leads. And it's important to note, obviously, your positive and your negative. So these strips are nicely marked. There's your positive, there's your negative. And of course, on this wire, I know it's not black and red or black and white, whatever, but it's red is positive. Typically, if you want it to be, green is negative. That way, if you just decide which one it is, you don't have to worry about it. So, all right, so I have that lined up, and all I'm using is some Tamiya masking tape. I use this for a lot of things. Sorry, get it in frame. Just to tape it down onto the wood surface so the wire doesn't move while I'm soldering. So I don't need any more solder because I have the little dot on the end of the wire. So now all I'm going to do, and this is a key to it, this is what I've learned from doing so many of these, is that you've got to get the solder hot enough that it will stick to that copper little tab on the LED strip. So what I do is I hold it down, and you kind of see it happen. It's hard for you to see in the camera probably, but let me start melting it. So even after it melts, I hold it in there, and there you see. You see how it filled out the copper? Once it filled out the copper, it was adhered. So it takes a few seconds, it heats it enough so that it sticks to that copper. So let me get and do the second one. There you go. So as you see, first of all, it starts to liquefy, and it's still kind of rounded, and it's still up on the wire, but not on the little copper pad. So I just hold it there until it heats it up enough that it heats up the copper, and it sticks. And I found that that sticks nicely, and it doesn't tend to come off of there, and it gives you a nice solid connection point. And then you just give it a few seconds to harden, cool down, and then when you pull this off, there's a nicely done soldering point. Nice and solid. So pretty much the same thing with two pieces of wire. If you just bring them close together, isolate them so you can put the solder on it, and then just heat it up enough that it hardens to, or it melts onto both sides of it, and then you have a nice connection. So, all right, this one's ready to go. All right, so I finished all of the panels that make up this little section right here. And I showed previously this one here, working on this one here. I did this one earlier, but I went ahead and reused it. I made a little box for the displays, and you can see how that's taller. And I kind of angled the sides so I could put the SMDs around the side of it rather than being straight down to try to avoid hot spots. And again, I'll keep tweaking that. I probably could put one right on the back of this and have it going straight down, and it would still give me the right light. But I'm still playing with that one a bit. But I wanted to do a mock-up of all of them, so I have these tacked on. They're not permanently glued on. I just tacked them on with some of my Bonding quick setting Plastruct cement, just so I could have them on there, and just kind of ran the wires together. When I do the permanent wires, of course, I'm going to trim them down and have them a lot more organized. In addition, I'm going to have all of these painted black before I glue them permanently onto here to keep the light contained and get the brightest light that I can from it. So let me go ahead and turn it around and I'll put it on and show you how that's going to look. All right, so there are the lights without the displays in there, and I'll show that all together in a moment. So I just have some translucent, some thin styrene on there to do the light. I'm going to play with that and with some of the vellum paper, which is really good at diffusing as well. And then what I've done is I've taken two of the backlit panels that I got from Paragraphics. Let me show you here a second. Sorry. Okay, so here's the Paragraphics set. They have quite a few panels that you can choose from, smaller ones for the center consoles in front of the bottom controls, and then a bunch of the bigger ones which go in these two side panels. So I've cut out a few that I'm not really going to use because I'm going to keep the good ones that I want to use for the final ones. And what I did was I took them and I put them on the back of some styrene, 0.030 I believe, and glued them in place. It doesn't really affect the light any, but they kind of overhang just a little bit so that when I put them over top, they fit right on top of that panel. I'm trying to do this with one hand. All right. And they're not exactly fit. I'll have to play with them, of course, when I do the permanent ones. That one's a little bit better. But you can kind of see they'll be glued in, of course, but I want them to cover up those panels, but I don't want them, I mean, I might end up putting them down inside. We'll see. I still have to play with the panels, but they look kind of cool. So let me show you the whole thing all together. All right, so there's a mock-up of all the lights. They're not permanently glued in, as I said. They're just kind of sitting there just to kind of show you the idea. So you have some that are much brighter than others. The yellows tend to come across a lot brighter. Certainly the ones there that I didn't use as much of the yellow styrene to do that. I still have to fill in some of those ones, like the ends there. You can see those two single ones. Those are the ones I mentioned that I'm going to use a single SMD, like a mega SMD, to light it from there. And those might be a little brighter as well, so it's going to give it some character, because definitely some of the lights are brighter than other ones. And then ones like those red ones there, they're more red in real life. They just come out more orange in the camera. They're going to have some, I think I'm going to use decals over them, but I have some of the overlays as well. And then the displays, that's not the permanent thing. I'm still working on that. The lighting is right, but but I have to figure out how to put them on there. I'm probably going to use some vellum rather than some styrene that I showed. So, okay, but definitely looking pretty cool. And I have pretty much all of that done with the light boxes, so I can go ahead and trace those out. And then I want to get them painted flat black on the back as well, so they'll get more light transmission before I permanently glue them onto the display or to the control panel. So, okay, but looking fantastic. All right, so that's going to wrap up this video for this week. A lot of really good progress on building these controls and light boxes to get the effect that I want. So definitely honed in the process for the light boxes, for the proper distance, for the varying images, for the brighter, the medium range, and then the further away for the displays. Definitely honed in how they're going to look with the different color styrene sheet that I'm using, which I think really works excellently. And so I'm going to start replicating that process on the right wraparound. I'm going to go back to the bottom controls section and redo some of those so they're all pretty well standard throughout the kit. So now that I have it down to where it needs to be, I can replicate a lot of these pretty quickly. Also honing in the effect that I'm doing, not the effect, honing in the process with the soldering and getting better at that because I'm doing so much of it. Which, as I said before, if you want to get good at something, build a model that has a lot of it going on. Like if you want to get good at airbrushing and using paint masks, build a Discovery because you will do a lot of that. If you want to get better at soldering, do a model like this that takes a lot of soldering for a lot of light strips and to get the effect that you want. And also building light boxes and that kind of thing. So, all right. Thank you to all my new subscribers. Stay tuned. I'm also continuing work on my ATST buddy build with Tim Striner, the glue and paper guy. So I will be posting a video of that soon as well. All right. Well, thank you to everyone, and I will see you the next time.